Swiss horns sounded across the valley, and their feared pikemen came out of the forest, behind the Burgundian army. As the Burgundian knights were rearranging their line, the Swiss charged downhill. The decisive Battle of Nancy that would end the Burgundian Wars was about to begin. The 22nd of October, 1476, the Duke of Burgundy, Charles I the Bold, laid siege to the city of Nancy, capital city of the Duchy of Lorraine. 10 months after his terrible defeat at the Battle of Embleton, Charles had, for the third time in the same year, raised a new army and marched to war. He had picked Nancy as his target because the Duchy of Lorraine seemed an easier target than the Swiss Confederacy. The timing of the siege of Nancy had been a poor decision by Charles, as his men would have to spend the winter outside the city. René II, Duke of Lorraine, began assembling his army as soon as the siege started. The Swiss Confederacy, next to whom René had fought earlier this summer in the Battle of Embleton, decided to not intervene directly. However, they authorized the Duke of Lorraine to hire their mercenaries, which he did, with economical support from the King of France. The morning of the 5th of January, Charles had been informed that the relief army was close and commanded his troops to take up battle positions. The Duke of Burgundy had placed his artillery in the front of the formation. Behind his cannons laid the mighty Burgundian infantry. At his flanks, his cavalry awaited impatiently. Both sides of the army were guarded by densely wooded hills. Overall, Charles had only managed to raise around 8,000 men, notably less than the previous battles, for his own supporters had grown weary of joining him in battle. Most of his companies of gendarmes were made up of only half their original numbers, and even his personal retinue was remarkably low in numbers. A short march away, the Lorrainian army scouted their enemy. Knowing that a frontal charge against the Burgundians would be suicidal, René II and his commanders opted for a different strategy. A slim detachment of handgunners would approach Charles' army head-on as a distraction force, while the Lorrainian forces awaited in the rear, and the Swiss mercenaries flanked the enemy through the forest. Overall, René II's army was made up of around 20,000 men, of which around 10,000 were from Alsace and Lorraine, and 10,000 were Swiss mercenaries. Almost half of the Lorrainian men were cavalry. As the forces of the Duchy of Lorraine set up their plan, Charles the Bold awaited patiently, confident in his positioning. The decisive Battle of Nancy was about to begin. It was still snowing when the Lorrainian host initiated their advance. The Swiss mercenaries marched into the forest, towards Charles' right flank. Through the mist appeared the Lorrainian arquebuses. Snow slowly ceased to fall. Swiss horns sounded off beyond Charles' right flank. Before the horrified eyes of the Burgundians, thousands of pikemen emerged from the forest and formed up for a charge. Heavy Burgundian cavalry were the first to engage the Swiss pikes. Charles attempted to turn his infantry against the charging enemy, but to no avail. The first few minutes were decisive for the outcome of the battle. Soon, the Burgundian knights retreated, unable to break the Swiss pike walls. Seeing their allies charge the enemy, the Lorrainian and Alsatian troops marched towards the enemy. Seeing himself surrounded, Charles committed his cavalry reserves. The die was cast. Around half an hour later, many Burgundians started to break their formation and fled towards Nancy. However, for Charles the Bold, who had fled from the field the two previous battles, retreat was not an option anymore. The personal guard of the Duke were surrounded, dismounted, and massacred where they stood. Finally, after an agonizing last stand, the last Duke of Burgundy, Charles the Bold, met his end. The Battle of Nancy was over. Now there would be an onslaught. By the end of the day, René II of Lorraine was victorious. The Battle of Nancy was the end for Charles the Bold, as well as for the Burgundian state. Of the 8,000 Burgundians that had heeded Charles' call, 7,000 lay dead, a mortality rate unbelievably high for a medieval battle. After Nancy, René II consolidated the Duchy of Lorraine, which would remain independent for centuries to come. As for the Duchy of Burgundy, Charles had perished without a male heir, and the land was torn between the Holy Roman Emperor, who had married Charles' daughter, and the King of France, who now claimed the duchy as compensation for his support to René.